find the equation of the following graph, and then after we do that, we have to rewrite the equation using the opposite function. So if we started with sine, we're going to write it in terms of cosine or vice versa. So I'm going to start with sine. You could start with cosine as well. Either works. And the general equation for a sine or cosine function is y is equal to a times sine b times x minus h plus k, where a is the amplitude, b is the period, h is the phase shift, and k is the center line. I'll kind of explain those as we go here, as we find each value. A, being the amplitude, is the distance between the center and the top. It's kind of like how large it is vertically. So as you can see, it's only 1 unit from here to here, so our amplitude is 1. And so our A value is just 1, so we don't actually have a value in front. Our B value is the period, which more specifically it's 2 pi divided by the period of our new function. And here you can see the period is just how often the function repeats itself. So if I started here and I went down, went back up, you can see it repeats again right here. So this distance here you can find is 2 pi, because here is 2 pi, so if I shift it over, it's also 2 pi. 2 pi over 2 pi is just 1, so once again, we don't have any b value, it's just 1. Next is the phase shift, which is just a fancy term for horizontal shift or horizontal translation. So to find this, we have to know that the sine function starts in the middle, right? For example, the sine of x, it starts at 0, which is halfway between negative 1 and 1. You can see sine starts at 0, whereas cosine starts at the top. Anyways, back to our function here. You can see it's going to start at negative 1. When x is 0, y should be negative 1. But it starts actually over here, meaning it's been shifted. Pi over 4, you can see this is pi, so each of these boxes is pi over 4. It's been shifted pi over 4 to the left, which is negative pi over 4. That's our h value, negative pi over 4. But you can see here in our equation, it says it's minus h. So in other words, minus negative pi over 4 is positive pi over 4. Finally, the center line, you might be able to figure this out. It's just the line in the middle, between the maximum and minimum. So it's just negative 1 in this case. And so our k value is negative 1. Now, how are we going to rewrite this in terms of cosine? Well, you have to understand that sine and cosine are very similarly related. If I take a look at the graph, you can see that they look almost the same, except the orange being the sine function, or I should rather say the cosine is simply the sine, but shifted pi over 2 units. So you see this point corresponds with this point with this point, and etc. If I shifted this whole orange graph pi over 2 to the left, it would equal cosine. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write it as cosine, but subtract pi over 2, because subtracting pi over 2, that's to the left in terms of shifting. So in other words, y is equal to cosine x minus pi over 4 minus 1. These two are the exact same. And actually, I can graph this on Desmos. Here, I'm going to get rid of these two. So the blue line, this is the function. You can see it kind of looks similar to the one in the graph. And the one at the top, actually they overlap. You can't even see the colors, it's kind of hard to see, but that's blue. And that's purple, and you can see that they're the same, they overlap each other. And so that's what's going to be your two answers.